Greetings and welcome to Grade 5, Unit 2. Please have your note sheet ready and a notebook to take some extra notes. Here we go. The first thing we're going to talk about is the place value chart. Now, we should know all these place values before the decimal. When we see a decimal point, we can read this as the word and. So anytime we say and in a number, that should represent a decimal point. So we should never be saying and anytime before or after the decimal point. And is only referred to as the decimal point. Now, in front of the decimal points, we had the pattern of ones, tens, hundreds, comma, of thousands place value, 1,000s, 10,000s, 100,000s, comma, 1 millions, 10 millions, 100 millions, comma, and so on. We can have the same pattern after the decimal, except for we don't have a ones place. We can consider the decimal as kind of the 1, and all the places after have zeros. So the very first place value is a 10 down here that we wrote, so we have tenths. Now notice, all of the words after a decimal add the THS. THS represents that it's only a part of a whole. Everything after the decimal is a part of a whole. So we have tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and then we would have a comma in that thousands. 10 thousandths, 100,000ths, and then we would have another comma in on that millionths. And we would keep going with that pattern. Let's take a look at some examples that are going to utilize this information. Forms of numbers. Standard form is when we write the number in numbers. Expanded form. We have two different versions of expanded form. This expanded form is using place value. So the 9 is in the thousands place value. The 7 is in the hundreds place value. This 1 is in the tenths place value, or tens place value, sorry. The 3 is in the ones place value. And the 4 is in the tenths place value, so we would put it 1 over 10. To read this number, we can put it into word form. So we have 9,000, we see the comma, so we need to have a comma in our word. 719, that's all our whole number, and represents our decimal. And 4, and we have 4 out of how much? It's in the tenths place value, so 4 tenths. Let's take a look at our example over here. If we wanted to expand it, we could do 9 times which place value it's in. And this is in the hundreds place value. Plus 2. And what place value is that in? Correct, the tens place. Plus 3, and 3 is in the ones place value. Plus 5, and what place value is the 5 in? If you're unsure, put a 1 for the decimal and start putting in zeros. And as you can see, it's in the tenths place value. So we're going to put 1 over 10. Plus, we have the 7. And the 7 is, if we keep adding our zeros, the 7 is in the 1,000ths place value. So 1 over 1,000. So that would be our expanded form. Word form. I'm going to use my typing tool, make it just go a little bit faster. For word form, we would have 920 hyphen 3 and 507, because that's how we would say that number, 507. And then we give the place value word that the 7 is in, which is thousandths. Let's make that a little bit to fit in our space here. So we would have 923 with that hyphen between the ones and the tens digit, and 507, and then the place value word of the last digit, which is thousandths. Our next thing is going to be the different types of properties. The two big ones that you're going to work on in the property of addition would be the commutative property, where we can change the order of any number. So we can see we can do 2 plus 4, or we could do 4 plus 2, and they both would get to the same answer. Associative property means we can group numbers together differently. So if we had 1 plus 3 plus 4, we could group our 3 and 4 together first, or we could group our 1 and 3 together first. Usually what we're going to group together are things that make easier numbers. Maybe it's the numbers that share the same fraction denominator, or maybe it's when we add quick tens. Another property is the identity property. Anything plus 0 is whatever you added. The last one we have is the distributive property. And remember, the distributive property is where we pass out. All right, comparing decimals. This is not on your note sheet, so this is something you might want to take some notes on. When you're comparing decimals, the very first step is to line up your decimals. If you have any empty spaces, you're going to fill those in with zeros. And then you begin with the greatest place value and move right until you see different digits. So if I line these digits up, I have 0.04, and I'm going to line up 0.2. My 2 has something missing here, so I can add in a 0 to hold places. And now I'm going to compare. The zeros are the same here, but in this column is where we have the difference. Which one's bigger, the 0 or the 2? The 2 is bigger, so I am going to use a less than symbol because this place value is greater than where the 4 showed up. The next one is adding or subtracting decimals. When we add or subtract decimals, we line up the place values. So we're going to really want to make sure we line up the decimals. If you look in our example over here, they kind of use that shirt method. So I always like to start with my decimal. Now, if I have $43.02, and then right here says 62 cents, I know that I have $0.62. And I'm going to add these together. So I start with my smallest place value, and I keep moving up. If right here there was a carryover, we would just carry it over to the whole number. The decimal stays lined up. And we get our answer, $43.64. Subtracting, same way. We can borrow from the whole number over into the decimal part if we need to. And when we borrow, we always borrow by powers of 10, since each place value is 10 times bigger or smaller than the one next door. Rounding decimals. We use rounding decimals a lot of times if we're trying to see if our answer makes sense. We're always going to be looking for the word about if we're doing word problems. If you see the word about in a word problem, then that means you're going to use rounding. So this case it says round to the nearest hundredth. And it has that TH. So I know I have my decimal is the 1. I have a 0 and a 0. So the 8 is my underlined digit. The 9 is going to tell that 8 what to do. And a 9 says to go up. So the 8 is going to go up to a 9. Everything in front of it stays the same, including where the decimal is. Everything behind the underline goes away. That's different than when we were rounding whole numbers. So make sure that where your underline is where you stop. If we want to round this one to the nearest tenth, that is a decimal and 1 spot. So my underline is this first 5. The second 5 tells it what to do. The second 5 says go up. So that 5 becomes a 6. And the 8 in front of it stays with the decimal point. And everything behind the underline goes away. The last concept is fractions to percents. It's really easy to work with fractions when we have out of any type of power of 10, because percents are out of 100. So we can change this fraction into a decimal, and then we can change it into a percent. We can also times this by 10 to get what the fraction would look like out of 100. So 100 would now be on the bottom, and 30 would be on the top, and that shows us that we have 30%. Let's take a look over here. We already know our percent because we have 60 out of 100. Percents are out of 100, so we have 60%. Now, how did we get from 60 to 3? We divided. So we can actually do the division. 60 divided by 3 gets us 20. So if I take 100 and I divide by 3 or by 20, I would get 5. Again, if I wanted to make this into 100, because I'm working with percents, I got to figure out what I multiplied by. And in this case, I multiplied by 5. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So 11 times 5 would be 55 out of 100. Now I can convert that to a percentage. I got 55% on that. All right, it is now time for you to try. Give the bottom half of your note sheet a try. Pause the video. Resume when you're ready to check your answers. All right, welcome back. Our first one, the number said 243,012. So we needed to put the 0 in to hold the 12 in the 1s and 10s place value. And then it says, and 61 thousandths. So that would be like saying we have 61 over 1,000. And we can convert that to a decimal, knowing that the decimal is the 1 in 1,000, and we have 3 place values. So we know we needed to put a 0 in front of the 61 to hold the 1 in the 3rd place value. Rounding, this is not a rounding question. Let's fix those answers. This one's just saying what is the place value of these words. So if you did do rounding, here's your answers for you. But the directions, write the value. The value of this one is 5 because we need to say how much it is. And it is 5 in the 1, 2 spots away from the decimal, so it's in the 5 thousandths. And make sure you put that THS at the end of thousandths. Okay, now the 7 is 3 spots away from the decimal. So we would say 7. And we would have to say that that's in, that one's not in the thousandths, that's in the hundredths. Hundredths with that TH. And this one is 7 thousandths, because this one's 3 spots away from the decimal. All right, the next one, we add, subtract. If we are adding and subtracting, we are getting, lining up our decimals, and then we get 32.71. If we subtract, we line up the decimals, and we get 4.93. On number 4, we're going to round our numbers, and we're going to round to the nearest whole number. So we round the 5.38 to 5, the 3.12 to 3, and so we have about 2 inches is how much the tree grew. If we have 40%, we have 40 out of 100. To get from 40 or 100 to 5, we divided by 20, so 40 divided by 20 is 2. 3 times 20 was 60, so I know that I had 100 on the bottom, divided by 20, and that answer's wrong too. That should be a 5. So 3/5 is the same thing as 60/100, which is 60%. Rewatch the video if you need to. Otherwise, practice your IXL skill plan and any lesson checks in the Math Activity Center. Good luck, and make sure you read the directions more carefully than I did on the first attempt.